this is the story now of the son of Isaac, as the son of Abraham. Isaac doesn't get much press in the book of Genesis. He's more or less skipped over to some degree. And I think it's because he just was a boring kind of fellow. Yeah, he's a passive kind of fellow. And that was good because he let himself be put up on that altar to be sacrificed. I mean, that's one thing it shows. But we don't see a lot of action from Isaac. That's okay. Everybody's different. Doesn't mean you got to be an action hero to be pleasing to God. But this is the genealogy of Isaac, or what it means is his family history. Abraham's son. Abraham begot Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah as his wife, the daughter of Bethuel, the Syrian of Padan Aram, the sister of Laban the Syrian. Now Isaac pleaded with the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord granted his plea, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. Now I want to go back just to show you this chart so you can see what he's talking about here. I got a little bit different chart than I've shown you before. Can you see it up there? So you have Terah is Abraham's father, and then he has two sons, Haran, who died before they ever got to the land of Canaan, but his son was Lot, who was traveling with Abraham. We know Lot from all the other stories, and then he had two sons, Ammon and Moab, and they produced some Jordanians and Palestinian people today. We have Terah also had a son, Nahor, on the other side of this chart, on the right, who had a son named Bethuel, and his daughter is Rebekah, and his son is Laban. Okay, now we're going to see that Laban has Leah and Rachel, two daughters. We're going to come up on that, which produced some of the 12 tribes of Israel. Rebekah marries Isaac, and they have Jacob and Esau. Esau marries Bashemath, Ishmael's descendant, and they have a bunch of other tribes which are listed in the Bible, Arabs, Edom, and so forth. But Isaac also has Jacob, and he marries Rachel and Leah. So you see there's a connection between Abram and Nahor, two brothers way back in the past, and their families interrelating to each other. Now there's a lot of generations and people in between these, and time in between, but that's the general gist of this story. So when Abraham told his servant, go back to my land of my fathers and find a wife for Isaac, and the servant brings back Rebekah, bringing back really someone who is related to his brother Nahor. And then you see Laban was Rebekah's brother. He now becomes more, when Bethuel is dead, Laban is the chieftain. By the time you get to the time of Jacob, he's dealing with Laban for his two daughters, Leah and Rachel, we're going to see. So you see this connection between these families. I don't know if that makes it more confusing or makes a little more sense, but that's what these passages are trying to say when they tell you so-and-so begat this one, the son of this one. Here's a chart.
Do you have copies of that?
I don't, but I can make some copies of that. Let me see how to do that here. What slide number was that? 534? Okay. I'll make a few copies if anybody wants them. I should have already done that. Okay, so there we go. Those are printing as we speak. Supposedly. I know, I'm going to bring it back up here. I can't show you and print it. I can't do it two things. Okay, so now let's go back where we were. We're past this. Let me go back where we were. So Isaac pleads that his wife might conceive because she is barren. There are several things that are common in Abraham's family. One of them is barrenness in the women. Is that genetic, or is it God closing up their womb? The Bible would say the word "close the womb," meaning that no offspring can issue forth from the womb until there's a period of time of trial and testing of this person. I did.
You're getting outside genetics.
What's that?
From the women, you're getting outside. It's not as intense. It's not.
You're getting outside genetics. Well, I would say, Ed, I'm connecting. If anybody wants one of those, they're right here. I would say that it's more a case of God using this family trait the way he wants to, and then he can drive the car and make it more intense or less intense, and somehow it affects some women. But when you see when you see Leah, she's Rachel's sister, you see some of these women don't have a problem conceiving. Some do. Was that Sarah's problem all those years? Possibly. And God opened up her womb, as it were. She was related to Abraham. So is Isaac's wife, Rebekah, related to Abraham. And so infertility. Well, Kai and Kelly Burke, these things run in family. Kai and Kelly Burke used to be a deacon here. Kai did, and Kelly. They had twins. And guess what? Kelly's daughter just had twins. So having twins runs in families. It was in my grandmother's family, twins were. It's not manifested itself in recent generations, but so does trouble conceiving. Does God control those things? He does. He uses them. Plus, he also he made nature the way it is, and it isn't just determined. He can sometimes steer that where he wants it to go for the right purposes. Another thing we see in this family is partiality. All through these stories, you're going to see that these people are partial to one child or another child. That's a very unhealthy characteristic. It isn't righteous at all, but it's there in this family. Does God use that? Yes, he does. He turns that his own way of making the story, because he has a purpose in mind in this. Hang on, I touched the wrong button here, making all my gesticulations. He has a purpose in mind of steering these events to lock the Jews into a pathway to bring Christ into the world. Here's all men he wants to save. He narrows it down to one family to bring one person into the world, then one person, Christ. Then he's going to save all families through Christ. But he has to narrow this thing down, and he does it through this family structure that he's got here. All right. Not up there? How about that one? Is that up there now? All right. So he prayed that she would conceive, and she did. How many people have you known that can't have a child, no matter what they do, they adopt, and next thing you know, they have a child? I've known this several times. So this is not something well understood why it is. But conception in a woman is often linked to things far beyond just physical things. Because like we were talking about last week in our big sidetrack, the physical and the spiritual in human beings is linked together, is wrapped up together. They're not, we want to make them separate. Science, so-called, quote, science and secular people want to separate out the spiritual from everything. They want to get rid of it. A lot of religious people have accepted this dichotomy that the spiritual and the physical are separated in some way so that they can't overlap or intertwine, and it makes them feel more spiritual. So sex is bad because that's physical. Where does the Bible say that? It doesn't say it. The Bible says sex is spiritual. So there's this whole disconnect because of trying to unwrap them. Secular people want to get rid of the spiritual, so they separate it out. But the spiritual and the physical, even in the idea of conception, are linked together. By spiritual, I mean the emotions and the spiritual thought, all the other things. True with both ways. And we don't understand a lot of that. Now then, so she does conceive. So the children struggle together within her. I think some of these women have felt this when they have twins. Well, Adam struggled with Judy and bruised her ribs. Well, she was literally bruised her ribs when she was carrying him. Still trying to. He's 40 years old. But anyway, children struggled together within her, and she said, if all is well, why am I like this? If my babies are okay, and this is God's will, why is it like this? So she went to inquire of the Lord. The Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb. 2 peoples shall be separated from your body. 1 people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. So here's the prophecy. Now, I don't think we can expect that anytime you're pregnant, you're having problems, you're going to get God telling you something specific like this. This is told because this woman is receiving God's direction, because these people are in the line of Christ. This is to help them understand how the nation of Israel got to be there the way it is. Not all things that happen like this have some prophetic meaning. The fact that you struggle with a pregnancy or lose a baby or all that kind of thing. I read a story of a woman that I read her blog some, and I really respect her. She's very wise, but she had twins, and they were grown. They've grown now. She said, I remember when they were teenagers. One day I was working, sewing or doing something in the living room there, and they both had fallen asleep on the couch. They were talking, and they fell asleep on the couch next to each other, boy and a girl. And she said the way that they moved on that couch, and the way that during their nap, the way they kind of rearranged themselves, she said, I could feel that that's what they had been doing inside me when I was carrying them. The way that they kind of, in synchronization, kind of flipped around and moved, changed places. She goes, I realized that's what they had done when they were inside of me. Because there is a connection between twins. It's strange connections. And I've known Christians who will tell you that, and they're very solid people, they're not the kind that see visions and stuff, that they know when their twin's in trouble who lives in another state. They know when something's wrong with her. They need to call. They just have this sense. And this is pretty well documented. Not understood, again. Not everything that's true can be verified by an experiment or in a test tube. Not everything that's true is understood. I know that's shocking to you people, but that's what the world's been telling you since you were little, that everything that's true can be verified in an experiment or a test tube. No. I mean, Bigfoot's real, and we don't know how he's real. I'm kidding. Anyway. Well, do we know if Bigfoot's real? No. Okay. Anyway, just so you know.
Seems like if it's real, they'd find one dead somewhere.
Seems like we'd find one dead somewhere, unless the other ones eat them. I don't know.
Unless Bigfoots live forever.
They live forever. I don't want to get off on Bigfoot. I'm just saying that there are things that are real that we don't understand yet. Maybe we never will understand. Don't dismiss something because it hasn't been proven in a scientific study or an experiment, necessarily. Now, then some things have been disproven by scientific experiments.
When I was used to scuba dive when I was a lot younger, of course, I saw I did the ocean, I love the scuba diving in the ocean. And the other day, I saw a program on television, and they found this creature that nobody had ever seen before. It was the ugliest thing I have ever seen.
Except Fred Flintstone, yeah. Nothing.
Fred Flintstone?
Well, he might have seen it.
Oh.
Anyway.
Well, anyway, I never seen such an ugly creature, but they checked all over, and it had never been.
There's animals we haven't seen yet.
No,
That's
I
true.
believe that. I mean, it's just, God creates.
A plumber pulled one out of my toilet one time.
Oh, my goodness.
creature. When you start pulling the thing out, I had never seen a creature like that, and him and his assistant were going, what in the world? They're all, well, it pulled it on out. It was the rear end first. Turns out it was a squirrel,
Oh, no.
and I'd been pouring drain cleaner down that drain, and it had taken all the hair off of that squirrel. It was about 2 weeks old, so a little swollen. So this squirrel did not look like a squirrel, but anyway, it was a squirrel, apparently. So you got to be careful when you see dead animals on a beach. They've been in the water a while. Anyway, we're digressing.
Yeah, we are.
Yes, let's go back. So when the days were fulfilled. Now, what's this prophecy mean here? What's the prophecy mean? If I can get it back up here. Two nations. Jacob and they're going to be called Jacob and Esau. That's who they are. One people will be stronger than the other. Well, I think that's going to be Esau and his tribes, very fierce physical people. And the older will serve the younger. Who's the older? Esau's the older, but he's going to end up serving the younger. Okay? And that's the story of the birthright and the blessing that's going to be exchanged of the two. So this is a prophecy of and she has no idea what this means, but this is showing you that God knew what was going on ahead of time. Okay, so these two babies, the days were fulfilled for her to give birth, exactly when the midwife in the hospital said it would be, on that exact day, the exact due date and hour when it would happen. That's when every baby has to be born on the exact due date, or something's wrong. The twins were in her womb. Indeed, there were twins in her womb. The first came out red in color. He was like a hairy garment all over. We've all seen babies like this. They're ugly. Hairy babies. Well, aren't babies hairy sometimes if they're born early? You know? Yes, we don't know. And red. My father said I was the ugliest thing he'd ever seen. I was so premature. And all bad color. The color was all wrong, and everything was wrong.
Mike,
Yeah.
who's stronger than the other might depend on your definition of strong.
Well, it could be reversed. In my opinion, Gary, he's saying one thing about one boy, one thing about another. Now, that may be wrong, but it's stronger in the sense of spiritually stronger, yes. But
And maybe more numerous over a longer period of time.
possible. It's possible. Probably the way she's going to see it, Esau becomes stronger because he's out in the field hunting, and Jacob's a little sissy boy at home. But you're right. It could be the other way.
In the long run.
You're right. Well, are the Jews more numerous than the Arabs? Maybe the sons of Edom, I don't know. Could be. Maybe they are. So this first one comes out hairy. His name was Esau. Esau means red. Generally, it's one of the words means ruddy or red. And afterward, his brother came out, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel, and so his name was called Jacob. So one baby comes out, and when it's coming out, they notice there's another hand a hold of the heel of the other one, and they named the second one Jacob. That word, the idea was, when they see this, he's trying to pull his brother back so he can be born first. That was the idea. He wants to be born first. He wants to be first, and that's why he's got a hold of his brother's heel. And the word Jacob means supplanter, one who takes the place of another, like trying to take his place. It means, I'll just translate it. Cheater, conniver, shrewd. That's the name Jacob. Conniver or cheater. He's willing to do about anything to get ahead. We think of, he's one of the patriarchs of Israel. He is the patriarch of Israel. Well, his name was cheater or conniver. In other words, he was the kind of person who was born who was willing to do anything he could to get ahead. His brother Esau was a big country boy, liked to hunt and fish and stay out in the woods. Just an easy one. But you made him mad, he was violent. You know anybody like this? Well, they're all over. She was like, the two parents liked the child that was opposite of them. Two parents, and that's typical. Two parents favored the child that was opposite of them. It's an unusual. Parents have children that are opposite of each other, and that's because they're opposites. And in this case, one favored one the other. But his name means supplanter. We don't use that word much, so I'm going to call it cheater's negative, but it's someone who is trying to get ahead, take the place of another to get ahead. Is there a name for this in the workplace? Somebody's always trying to get ahead of everybody else? I don't know, there may be a name for it. I heard a great nickname the other day these people use. They're clever. I was helping do some work somewhere, and somebody said, well, looks like the blisters have showed up. I said, blisters? And that guy said, yeah, they're what show up after the work is over. The blisters show up after the work is over. So you ever make, in any organization you got, or family, you got any blisters? You probably do. They show up once the work is done. Anyway, I never heard that before, but people have names like this, clever names, and Esau was one of those, Jacob was one of those names. Now, what's important about that? Well, it is a negative trait that turns out that God can use in a good way. And what you're going to see is this man, what you see in the life of Jacob is God changes this man's character, where he turns out to have better character than just being a cheater. And that's a job that's sometimes hard to do. Our boy Adam is so competitive. He had older brothers who always were picking on him, putting him down because he was the smallest boy of the three boys. In his mind, he was the boss, but he was the littlest one at that time. And so he played games with his older brothers. They always tried to beat him at everything, and they did beat him a lot. But other times they didn't. But he would start losing. Then he'd get mean, violent, and try to hurt them. Or he would cheat and change the rules and come in complaining because and the brothers say he changed the rules in the middle of the game because he just had to win. He had to win. Is that a bad characteristic? Can be, not necessarily. You can turn that into something good. Being stubborn and determined to win, you can turn it into something good. Or it can become a very, very negative thing. And so hopefully we turned it a little bit. I think we turned it pretty well. But that was his nature. And being the younger, he wanted to be the older. Most of these world dictators who try, revolutionaries, not necessarily dictators, but revolutionaries are very often second-born sons. They're not the first-born sons. They're often the leaders and the presidents. But the revolutionaries, the violent ones especially, are second-born sons. Why? They can't come by it naturally. They have to start a revolution to get to power. And so they do. There's a lot of stuff like this. Anyway.
In a way, also, Jacob suffered with the infighting in his family that probably was a result of some of this too.
Oh yeah. His life is dictated by this nature. Now the question I have is, did he have a hold of his brother's heel because of some divine purpose? Or was it he really wanted to get ahead of his brother? Probably not that. But something was going on there, and it just, one of those things that became a sign. That's how people named him, but it became a lifelong characteristic. And this is a problem. Sometimes parents and relatives assign characteristics to kids that can either be good or bad for them the rest of their life. They assign them a characteristic and a name or a thing, and it's good or bad. But Jacob was this person. He was the one who had to get ahead at all costs. And so the boys grew. Verse 27. And Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field. But Jacob was a mild man, meaning more or less a weak and passive man, sort of passive. Mild. No. I think some versions say quiet. He was dwelling in tents. He was a homebody. he liked to watch the cooking channel and make a new casserole from time to time. Redecorate the tent. Not a homosexual, obviously, but he liked being at home with his mother. He didn't want to go out and get dirty and hot and kill animals, shed blood, be violent. He wanted to get ahead, but he didn't want to do it with violence. And he's not a violent man. His brother is more violent. Sorry, I got a tickle in my throat here. But his brother tends to be more violent, but he wants to get his way more by trickery. Just because you're passive and not violent doesn't mean that you don't want to get ahead. You're going to tend to use more. Women want to get ahead, but they don't use violence. They might get other people to be violent. They might get a boyfriend to be violent, but they tend to do things that are more deceitful, secondary. But both men and women want to be boss, and both want to get ahead. Now, what's it say? Isaac loved Esau, opposite of him, because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So, this is how it works in this case. Jacob is probably more like her husband, so she likes the one that's like her husband. This is central to this story and central to a lot of these Bible stories. We see this playing out. I think it's kind of ugly in families today to see this kind of partiality. Yeah, what am I doing? Oh, thank you. I've got some sinus drainage, and it's tickling my throat. All right, thank you. Sorry about that. I'm sure it's disgusting, but in any event, now Jacob cooked a stew. There he is. Saw this recipe on the TV. Got him to come cook me a stew today. And Esau came in from the field, and he was weary. And Esau said to Jacob, "Please feed me with that same red stew, for I am weary." So it was red. And therefore his name is called Edom. Edom is a country. It's a people after this, a powerful people in the Middle East. Many of the relatives still exist today. Edom became a powerful nation of violent hunters and traders and slave traders, people like that, a little bit later on. But that's why Moses is telling the people that lived then, this is where this came from. This is where these people come from this man Esau. He wanted some red stew. That's how he got his name. Later they lived in red rocks, we'll see, some other time. But Jacob said, he's like a lot of politicians. He's not going to let a crisis go to waste. Here's a crisis. He's not going to let a crisis go to waste. We got to take advantage of this crisis. This boy's hungry. Let's see if I can get something out of this I want. Sell me your birthright as of this day. So I want your birthright. Since Esau was born first, he had the right to the father's inheritance. He had the right to be the head of the family. That was his right, to be the head of the family going forward when Isaac was dead, and he had the right to the primary inheritance. Sell me to me as of this day. And Esau said, "Look, I'm about to die, so what is this birthright to me?" He didn't care about any of that stuff. He liked to go hunting. Then Jacob said, "Swear to me as of this day. I'm not going to just take this as a casual thing. Swear to me." And so he swore to him, and he sold his birthright to Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau bread and stew of lentils. I love that. Then he ate and drank and rose and went his way. And thus Esau despised his birthright. Despise means what? I've told you 100 times. What does despise mean? Look down on. Doesn't mean hate. It means look down on, not to count it. D means down. S-P-I, that word means to look at. So it means to look down on something, not to take it seriously or to count it as being less than what it should. You look down on it because it's not as good as you think as it really is. So he didn't think his birthright was worth as much as it really was, and he was willing to sell it then for a bowl of stew. And he ate and drank on his way. Never gave it a second thought that day, because he was hungry. Now his belly was full. And since his physical appetite was satisfied, got his belly full, perfectly happy to do this. Now then, look at this New Testament. Our time is almost up, but look at this reference here in the book of Hebrews, because this comes up in the book of Hebrews. Very important. These are definitional concepts in the Bible. Profane, defile, birthright, firstborn. These are important concepts. He says in Hebrews 12, verse 14, pursue peace with all people and holiness, without which no one will see the Lord. Peace, holiness is being set apart to God, pursuing God, looking carefully lest anyone fall short of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up cause trouble, and by this many become defiled. Lest there be any fornicator or profane person like Esau, who for one morsel of food sold his birthright. And afterward he wanted to inherit the blessing. But he was rejected, for he found no place for repentance, though he sought it diligently with tears. Later on, Esau tried to reverse this, and Isaac would not do it, because he knew that him selling this birthright was an indicator of his true character. So he says here, he calls Esau two names, two descriptions, a fornicator and a profane person. A fornicator is someone, the word porneia, in its original, now that's the Greek word for fornicator here. This is in English, and then the Hebrew word has a similar meaning. The word porneia literally initially meant to sell something which should not be sold. To take your mother's wedding ring and sell it for nothing, or because you want to buy some cheap trinket. You got a family heirloom and you sell it for a cheap trinket. That's the idea of fornication. So you take your body, your sexuality, which is given to you to give to your spouse, and you give it to somebody else for nothing or for something cheap. Or you sell it for money. You sell your body for money or pleasure. That's a fornicator. That's how it can be more applied in the Bible to sex, sexual things, or spiritual adultery. In this case, he calls Esau a fornicator. Why? Because he sold something that should not be sold, that could not really be sold actually, this birthright. He sold it, and because of that, he became a profane person. The word profane does not mean filthy, like using a potty mouth word. It means to not count something as holy that is holy. To profane it is to treat a holy thing as if it isn't holy. So you take something from the Ark of the Covenant and you treat it as if it's nothing. And the priest would maybe take one of the golden bowls and go home and eat it, or go have a snack out of it. This would be unthinkable in the time of the temple, because they would be profaning it. When God, and that's what you do with your marriage when you commit adultery. You profane something which is holy and set apart. When you use your body for that which it should not be used for, you have profaned the temple of God. That's the idea. So this word profanity is a word that's not understood, but he said Esau is profane because he did not respect holy things. He didn't care about holy things, about God's will. He didn't care about the birthright. He didn't care about the blessing. He didn't care about the inheritance his father had been given. Who gave him this inheritance and this blessing? Jehovah had blessed Abraham's family. And he was going to become the leader, the inheritor of this great blessing of one more the Messiah was going to come, and he didn't care about that. He just wanted to eat and be filled and go hunting again. Now we know a world full of people like this, where they consider spiritual things that are really significant as if they're nothing. And that's where we are, because the world's always been full of profane and fornicating people. Anybody have a comment? Sorry for the sermon, but that's Esau is the father of the fornication and the profanity. And yet, I got a feeling if we met these two boys, we'd like Esau better than Jacob. Jacob was probably a little Weasley guy. Sneaky, you never could trust him. Esau was a guy that always had some venison to give you. Slap on the back, big strong guy. He was a guy we all like. But that's not how it was in the real world, in reality. All right, thank you very much. Those charts up here. I'll try to put them in the back if you want one of those Abraham family charts.